what I got here from school. Hey, Paul.
Got 10 seconds, Paul. Hurry up, start running. Good evening. I'd like to call the order meeting for Bedford Township for September 3rd, 2019. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, if Josh Rozak could come up, he's with Bedford Alliance Church, to open us up in prayer.
Would you pray with me? Jesus, thank you for today, Lord. Thank you that we live in this country that has freedoms, that we can even meet in this building. Lord, we thank you for the freedom that you give through your life and through your death and your resurrection. And Lord, I just pray today you would give these leaders wisdom and strength and guidance on what to do. I pray this all in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much. Item 2 is approval of the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Support. Okay, motion supported by Mr. Montry. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Clement?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner is absent. Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 6-0. Item 3 is the consent agenda. The agenda committee recommends to approve and place on file the minutes of the August 20th, 2019 regular meeting of the Bedford Township Board. B, approve the appointment of Kyle Godlewski, Carl Arnold, and John Ponke as probationary paid-on-call members of the Bedford Township Fire Department.
Motion to approve.
Support.
Motion supported by Mr. Clements. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Clement?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 6-0. Next on the agenda is public comment. Comments limited to 2 minutes for board agenda items only. Come on up.
Gail Kane, 1056 West Temperance. I'm addressing 8E. The idea came from the township, not the road commission. An earlier purchase agreement was signed by the supervisor, and even if the project will alleviate the negative impact of increased traffic from Mr. Decker's development, I think the project should be scrapped for the cheaper solution. 8G, if accepted by the board, we need to prevent imposed closed specs and demand a tight bidding process. I've been trying to find out who approached who. And I'm just wondering if these Bedford residents are bait for the 2020 election. I can't believe that there's no other companies at all to where this board could have a choice and look and for reviewing. We've treated assessing an ordinance to excess help. So in good faith, let's fill the 2 full-time maintenance positions that have not been filled for a very, very long time. I don't think anybody has thoughts of union busting, do they?
Thank you for your comments. Any more comments from the public? Seeing none. Moving on to new business, 8A, vouchers for payment. Ms. Hirschberger?
I'd like to make a motion that the following vouchers be approved for payment. General fund in the amount of $199,582.98. Fire district, $59,534.72. Police fund, $349.27. Park fund, $5,967.63. Transit system fund, $15,177. Library fund, $5,653.94. Rehabilitation fund, 54 cents. Lewiston Estates SAD, $360.45. Sewer O&M fund, $709.05. Trust and agency fund, $229,521.18, for a grand total of $516,856.76.
I'll support.
Motion supported by Mr. Francis. Discussion, Ms. Tinneberry?
Could I just have an explanation of what we bought for 54 cents? Rehabilitation fund, 50%. It's more a joke than anything. You
I
can
know.
pass on it. I just didn't know how we could get 54 cents, but, okay, just,
Okay, moving on to,
We have
oh
to-
wait,
yeah.
let's do roll, call the roll, please.
Herschberger votes aye. Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Mr. Prony?
Aye, the motion passed 6-0.
I have an answer to that
Oh,
question.
good, I knew you.
It's an
would know what my-
allocated amount from the unemployment tax that we pay.
Oh,
It's allocated 54 cents.
okay, good.
8B, bids for painting the Bedford Branch Library. Mr. Montroy?
Yeah, so this is the third time we're putting this out. The first time we brought back and was denied based off of procedural issues. Second time we brought it out, we got one new bid. And we had our original, the original recommendation bid came in that the owner of that company was out of country when we put it out for bid for the second one. And then, like, as you can see from Mr. Lambert's email, the board voted to, there was major price, or like, bid discrepancies among the three different bids, and they just wanted to scrap it. They wanted to put a little bit more effort. It wasn't a time-sensitive job that needs to get done. Most of the companies were saying they wanted to do it in fall, winter anyway, so they're gonna deny all bids, putting it back out for bid, and looking for like a little bit better results in the amount of bids that they're getting back, as well as like sending them back out to these companies, let them know we're looking for new bids.
Ms. Tinneberry?
What do you mean discrepancies? Didn't everybody get the same bid package?
Like from, yes, but if you can look on this first one, from 50 grand to 25 grand.
Oh, you mean a price difference? Well, a lot of people want the Cadillac and, want paid more and other people paid less. I've seen that many, many times. So just because they bid less doesn't mean that they're not going to complete the job as bid. So in the bid, it looked to me like everybody had a chance to bid on the same thing.
Yes,
Okay, so if they bid $26,250 on the exact same thing, they would be required to do the job based on everything that was put on the bid specs.
the bid that came in, that the owner was out of country, he was about 8 grand less. And like with the opportunity to maybe get it within his bid, that's why they wanted to put it back
Now,
out.
wait a minute, the guy that was out of the country is not on this?
Not on this, he was in the first one. So he was the one that had been accepted the first time, then was out of country. So it's like, and then his bid ended up coming back in late after the cutoff.
So basically what I'm hearing, they want to put it back out for bid so this guy that bid the first time can bid it again.
I get all that, but, I mean, once the bids are in, everybody sees them, is that really a fair and equitable procedure? I guess I'd ask the attorney.
In the bid documents, the township always reserves the right to reject any and
I
all
get that.
bids for any reason. So from a legal point of view, it can be done. So I'm not, I had heard this, Nancy, and in looking at this, I don't know if the exact specifications are going to be rebid or if the specs are going to be redrawn to provide perhaps a clearer picture of what it is that the library wants done, or the township, being the owner of the property, wants done through the library advisory board. So I'm not clear on that. Legally, I'm comfortable with it being rebid. Practically, people, if the same specs are sent out, yes, everybody who's bid knows what everybody else's price is, because now it's a public record. So I'm not sure what the procedure is going to be going forward. I thought I heard that the specs may be redrafted to provide more clarity for those who are going to bid the project.
Okay, I guess, and I personally, I don't know any of these bidders, but my concern is that we point bids to a certain person we want, and we keep rebidding till we get that. It just doesn't seem right, even in government. It doesn't seem right to me, but it's just my opinion.
Mr. Clements?
2 questions. Because of a couple of the companies that applied, was part of the package omitted to us, which would govern they have insurance, they are in fact licensed? That all was received as part of the package, correct? I'm hearing yes, but I'm seeing no.
No, you have the package.
Okay, so that would not have been, because I'm reading through it and I don't see that's part of the,
You have what they submitted.
okay.
That's
So in the case, and I don't want to use a name, but let's just say the first bid, for point of clarification. With the DBA, we don't have a copy of their business license. We don't know that they carry the correct insurance.
Correct. The board has everything that was submitted.
Okay.
Perhaps
It was
the,
Oh, okay,
requested.
I misunderstood your question.
Information was requested, but this is what we received.
Okay.
perhaps the Library Advisory Board and this board should take a careful look at the specs to make sure that the specs clearly identify the scope of the work that's being sought, and clearly identify that licensing and bonding and everything that goes with that is provided at the time of the bid, or the bid won't be reviewed.
And that's ultimately where I was going with this, is to me, it feels like the risk now shifts to us in the acceptance of this because there's just fundamental documentation that's not here. I
Correct.
wouldn't be comfortable with approving any of these.
The minutes reflect exactly what was included with each bid.
Okay.
Mr. Francis?
I'm familiar with one of the three bidders, never heard of the other two. Is it possible that when we, if and when we send the specs out again, that we ask for references so that we can check with some companies that they've done work for? One of them gave a few, but the other two gave nothing, and not having heard of them before, I don't know, it's hard to make a determination which one is good. Just because it's a low bid doesn't mean it's the best job. We're trying to get the best job for the best price. So I just don't think we have enough info to do it. And who prepared the specs anyway? There's 13 pages of specs.
Harry
a lot of work.
Harry Lamber's on the Library Advisory Board.
It's quite detailed. Anyway,
I look for a motion either way. Table it, bring it back, or
Well, I mean, to what?
Well, I
To
mean-
not put it back out to bid? I mean, the board,
To
they,
deny all bids, that's the,
to deny them, that's what the recommendation is.
this board would have to deny all the bids.
oh, this,
They can't
okay,
do it.
that,
This
there,
board
even
has
that
to
is
do
a
it.
recommendation. Okay.
Right.
Ms. Tinnenberg?
Their request is that they send the same specifications out. So I would think that at least those, the insurance, the references, the bonding, all of that should be included in the motion, if, rather than just the same specs.
To make that part of your motion, to make it part of your motion.
Are you looking for a motion, Mr.
Yeah.
Supervisor? I make a motion that we reject the complete bid package offered to this board with the recommendation back to the Bedford Library Advisory Board that in addition to the documents they're seeking, that they would reevaluate their bid proposal and ensure that proper licensing and insurance information is submitted with future bids.
and
Support.
References?
In reference.
References, sure.
I'll support the bid if there, or the motion, if there isn't any.
Okay, motion is supported by Mr. Francis. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Ms. Tinnevery?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 6-0.
Do you need
Item
a
eight.
separate motion to put it back out? Or that's,
No,
that's the
that's it.
rejection in?
Item 8C, purchase of pro panels for the Bedford Branch Library. Mr. Montroy?
Jody, I don't know if Jody wants to come up as well.
Jody, how you doing?
Good, how you doing? Is this on? Okay.
So we're just looking, board voted to approve the purchase of the pro panels for the artwork. It's all part of the budgeted, part of the millage. I don't know, any questions on,
I don't know if you want any more background information, but we have an annual art show that we hold in the first week of November every year. And we have so many entries that we don't have enough panels to display all the art anymore. Last year I had to run to another branch and get some from them, and theirs are different than ours. So then, I mean, we're putting up a fine arts show and it looks pretty tacky because they don't look the same. So we're just trying to get 6 more panels that'll make it so that it looks as professional as we want it to look.
Comments, questions? Seeing none, I look for a motion.
motion to approve the purchase of the pro panels for Bedford Branch Library.
For how much?
Believe it is $1,000.
$1,000, yeah.
Support.
Okay, motion supported by Ms. Tinneberry. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Ms. Tinnevery?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 6-0. Item 8D, purchase of furnishings for the teen room at the Bedford Branch Library. Mr. Montroy?
Again, over in the young adult area in the library, looking to maybe replacing a couple chairs and then adding a few of the stools and the tables. Again, part of the millage, just for setting that separate area in the library for the kids. And then again, I don't know if Jody wants to add more.
We had budgeted $5,000 for that, and that was part of the millage plan that we had presented. The current cost of the ones that we want to purchase is $3,114.25. This is to replace 8 chairs that are currently in that room. In your packet, you have a picture that shows some of the damage to those. Those were original with the building, so they are 15 years old. They're wood frames, which are chipped, and you really can get slivers off of them if you run your hand across it. The fabric seat area is pretty badly stained and can't come clean anymore. So we're proposing that we get some chairs that are literally more like what you would find in a classroom setting. They'll be a hard plastic surface, easy to keep clean. It matches the table and the color decor in the room. So that's replacing 8 of them. And then the township maintenance guys have been very generous in helping us remove some shelving and rearrange some things in there so that there's some added space for furniture. So we want to do 2 cafe tables with 3 chairs at each of those just to provide a little more room. We get 50 to 100 kids every day that come over to the library after school. And there's only 8 chairs in the young adult room, so it'd be kind of cool to provide a little more space for them.
Any comments or questions, Ms. Tinneberry?
Are these from MTS?
The chairs that we're recommending are not from MTS. They're from a place called the Library Store and Demco. Those are 2 library furnishings.
Oh, I just saw.
What I provided there to you guys is some stuff from MTS that show similar items so that you could see the pricing difference, because library furnishing is expensive because we want it to be sturdy, last forever, but the prices on MTS are quite a bit more than the prices from that we were looking at. So a similar chair, they don't do plastic chairs, but they do the wood and the metal kind of chairs, and a similar chair from them is $300 to $500 as opposed to $112 to $135.
I see that, however, the shipping is $850.
I know, but I mean, I guess I agree that the shipping was atrocious. When I looked at that, I was appalled myself. But if you consider that that's 14 chairs and 2 tables, it's probably quite a bit of weight. I didn't look at what the weight was.
Did you check Amazon Prime? You could get free shipping. No, they don't have, they have everything. I thought maybe.
Amazon's doing some stuff that's not real kind to libraries. That'll be a story for another day at another board meeting I can tell you guys about.
We're looking at a boycott.
I do personally love Amazon, but yeah, they're not playing very nice right now.
Okay, well, I'm just thinking that maybe the Library Advisory Board could drive up and get these chairs for
Yeah, wherever they're from,
$850.
California. Is that mileage? Do you guys pay mileage?
Okay, never mind.
Just asking.
I really would like to see us go local. I mean, if there's, did you talk to,
I didn't talk to them, no, because they really don't have something that's the same style.
That's the problem. They don't have what you want.
Right.
Okay, I get that, but. Any more comments or questions? Seeing none, I look for a motion.
Motion to approve the purchase of the furnishings for the teen room at the Bedford Branch Library with the 8 chairs, 2 tables, 6 stools, and coming out as a total of $3,114.25.
Support.
Okay, motion is supported by Ms. Tinneberry. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 6-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jody.
Thank you, Jody.
Okay, item 8E, Phase 2 Environmental Study Report from Mannik Smith. Mr. Bushman, come on up.
Good evening. Barry Bushman, Mannik Smith. Yes, we completed the Phase 2 environmental study. Actually, it was a study that we did independently for both the old tavern building, the house that's on premises along with the garage, as well as the overall limited Phase 2 for the property itself. The conclusions were actually fairly undramatic about what we expected. There was some limited amounts of asbestos in the buildings, which is pretty typical of buildings of that era. The one thing that did surprise us a little bit at the groundwater sampling and the groundwater interface, we did get some heavy metal that were the level slightly above the residential standard, and which would consider this a facility. But that's not unique to the property necessarily. When you sample groundwater, groundwater travels. It's not necessarily from that site. In fact, there's nothing on the site that would suggest that the contamination alone was in fact from the tavern site. In fact, we could probably sample the property, the residential property, next door or on the other side of the street, and more than likely we'd find the exact heavy metals in some of the groundwater, unfortunately. And that could have come from some site half a mile away or a quarter mile away, and probably did, in fact, because it doesn't indicate that, you know, the groundwater sampling from this site. But nevertheless, it does qualify as a facility, and as a result of that, you would want to do some, probably if the purchase does go through, you would want to file some sort of a baseline assessment, which essentially just says, here's the level of contamination that we've found on the site right now and that we are not responsible for. And then your activities thereafter would govern if you're responsible for any further activities or any other contamination. So I guess that's pretty much the report. If you'd like more questions, if you have any questions or more details, I'd be glad to answer them for you.
Phil, you want to talk about the third addendum we got into?
Sure. We do have an addendum. The closing date was rapidly approaching. We wanted Mr. Bushman to have the opportunity to present Mannik Smith's findings to you and recommendations for a baseline environmental assessment and a due care plan, which in my opinion is absolutely essential if we're going to move forward with the purchase of this property. I'll just put it in simple terms, you can't purchase the property without having both of those. So we have an extension of time. that's provided for in the purchase agreement. The parties have agreed to an extension of time in which to conclude the assessment. It's my understanding, Mr. Bushman, correct me if I'm wrong, that no further inspection or investigation needs to be completed. That's all been done based upon the data that has been found during the inspections. The BEA, the baseline assessment evaluation, would be performed, and so too would the due care assessment or report or plan. That would be done. So we have additional time, but if the board chooses to move forward with this project, I strongly recommend that you approve the preparation of the baseline environmental assessment and the due care plan. We have that in place so that we have that in place prior to closing. In addition to that, the title commitment came back, and we, as your attorneys, had a couple of objections, neither of which is earth-shattering, one of which is unenforceable, and we've asked the title company to remove that because it's unconstitutional. And secondly, and just by way of brief explanation, it limits occupation or ownership to this property to members of the Caucasian race. Well, that is unenforceable. It has been, it's in old restrictions that are recorded way back in time, unenforceable, unconstitutional. We want that removed from the policy, and also this particular property is the part of an old platted subdivision, the restrictions of which have expired by operation of the restriction that's been recorded at the Monroe County Register of Deeds office, so we've asked that to be removed. That should not be an issue, will not be an issue with the title company and the commitment, but again, I can't stress enough that if you're going to move forward with the project and if you're going to close on this property, you have to have a BEA and you have to have a due care plan, and Mr. Bushman has set out what those the costs will be, the low estimate and the high estimate, so you have a range in front of you. And then we'll take care of the title issues, and we already have addressed that. We put them on notice in writing. That's been done. So that's what you have, and that's what you have to make a decision on tonight. Again, it needs to be done tonight if you are going to move forward with the project and close on the property.
Anybody have any comments or questions for Mr. Bushman or Mr. Goldsmith? Ms. Tinberg?
Well, as you know, I've been totally against this from day one, so I do have some questions. I guess a comment first. I don't see why we would be doing this for the real estate company, the owner. They should be doing it themselves. They own the property. They couldn't sell it without it. You're just telling me, so I don't get why we're doing it. But so this is an additional between $5,700 and $7,700 that we have not budgeted for. This has not been in any of the pricing that we've gone over already. Is that true?
Right, you're correct.
Okay. So I wouldn't imagine that you know, but do you, Mr. Treasurer, know what the total cost has been so far?
I don't have that figure in front of me, no. Excuse me, we don't have a whole lot in it at this point. I think the budgeted numbers that we were working with included $100,000 for acquisition of the property. This would be part of that, and we're still going to be under $100,000 by quite a bit. So it wasn't specifically budgeted because we didn't know we had to have that piece, but we've got enough in the original budgeted amount, I think, to cover it. Is that a fair statement?
I believe so.
Mr. Bushman?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, based on the information, I can't remember the exact sale price, but I know that I believe a portion of the phase two was going to be absorbed or deducted from the
Correct.
purchase price.
5,000.
Correct.
5,000.
Only at closing. If we close on the property, the seller will reduce the purchase price by $5,000 to defray the expense. I think, Barry, we have what, $10,000 in the environmental assessments thus far?
We should have had around, I'm trying to remember the exact numbers as we were speaking. I believe we had around $2,800 in the phase one. In the limited phase two, I think our budget number was around 10. That was a budget number not to exceed, I believe. And then this, of course.
Well, I see different figures, but nonetheless, I just think, we got the cost of the, never mind. I'm just not I'm not in favor of purchasing the property. I'm not in favor of any of the paying to get rid of any of the, I know you're not a real estate man, but isn't it going to be difficult to sell this property to someone who wants to, I can't imagine anybody would want to build a house in a roundabout. That's just my opinion. But I just can't, I don't know. I just see it differently. I don't think I'm being negative. I think I'm just sharing a different opinion, but I just can't see continuing to pour money into something that I don't think we're going to get out of. And besides, I also think it's just not right that the government pays for all of this. We've got the road commission who's going to own the right-of-way. We've got the the seller who should be abating their own property. And here we are just jumping in with both feet, taking care of all of it. So that's my opinion.
I would think the last thing we've done is jumped in with both feet. We've been working on this for
Well, that's my
7, 8
opinion,
months.
okay? That's my opinion. Thank you.
And two, with the property, I'm sure there'd be a few people, or a couple at least, extremely interested. One being probably Pollock Funeral Home, because the property abuts his property, and he would have another entrance onto Jackman Road, and probably more parking for him, which is much needed. So, I mean, but, we've had talks with the chief as well. Once the property's abated, it could be used as training, to burn the building down. So, I mean, those are options that we have, to save money. They could use that for training purposes, so, and that would save even more. And then with the sale of the property, even if you get 10,000 out of it, I mean, it's something, and that keeps us way under our number at the end of the day. Any more comments or questions for Mr. Bushman? We've been, I'm proud of the fact that this board has done its homework. We've taken a long time and really carefully looked at this project. And I think at the end of the day, with what we've done, we're protected. Phil, would you agree to that? With everything that we're doing?
Excuse me, the board has done its due diligence, hired the appropriate professionals to conduct the assessments at the property. What the additional costs will be here tonight. You cannot go through with a purchase without having the BEA done, because that protects the township. So the purchase agreement is contingent upon the board's being satisfied with the requirements set forth in the purchase agreement, one of which, and one of the most important, was the environmental assessment, because you have a building there that's been standing for some time, it's been vacant for some time, it's older. So the due diligence in that regard has been successfully completed. Now you know what the complete picture is. Now you know, going into it with open eyes, whether you want to or not.
Two, I want to remind the public that I've heard a few times, well, why don't you use that money in other areas? You can't. That money is specifically for that intersection, for a roundabout. So if we deny that money's gone. So the road commission was going to put $175 towards it, plus the $600,000 grant. So there's $775,000 that can't be used anywhere else. So that intersection, the way it sits right now, would probably continue to sit like that for a long time, because the road commission, if we deny a grant, is not going to come jumping in, helping to fix it. So, anybody else have any more comments or questions? Mr. Francis?
I know we're not all in agreement on this. I respect Nancy's opinion, always have. She's been a friend for many years, and that's not going to stop. I happen to have a different opinion on this issue. I guess maybe because I've been closer to it than most. I've been working on it for quite some time. And with that in mind, I would move that we, if the motion is proper, that we approve the costs that Mannik Smith have laid out for the baseline environmental assessment, for the abatement, for the former tavern building and the vacant house, for an estimate cost between $5,700 and $7,700 as presented by Mannik Smith.
I'll support.
Okay, motion is supported by Mr. Montry. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
No,
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 5-1. Phil, do we need to entertain a motion to actually move forward in purchasing the property tonight, or can?
No, because we
Already
need
done it,
to,
didn't
we needed authority to get the BEA done and the due care plan done, and we have time for the rest.
Okay.
We want to see those documents before we close.
We've left enough time for the next
Yes,
meeting.
yes, yes.
Right. Say one more
Ms.
thing.
Hirschberger?
Nancy, I don't know if I have all the numbers, but based on this, with this new amount, it looks like we'd be at 78,700.
I think you missed a couple, but we can talk about it later. It's a lot more than that.
Okay, moving on to 8F, proactive ordinance violations. Mr. Cecil, come on up. Well, we'll call it public comment at the 5-minute mark. But you missed comment at 2 minutes in the beginning. Do you get a comment at 5 minutes in the end? Mr. Cecil?
Good evening. The reason I'm here, obviously,
Can you pull up the mic like 5 miles? Thank you.
okay. The reason I'm here is that the question becomes all the time is whether the ordinance department needs to be proactive or complaint-based. When I came here, we were doing things like taking anonymous complaints. I would get a handful of anonymous complaints on a daily basis from an individual. The problem we had going out on anonymous complaints was that a lot of times they were nothing more than harassment of the neighbor. They didn't like their neighbor, so they figured since they could remain anonymous, they would contact us and just have us go out there, and then we would find out that these individuals were not only sent, we not only got sent to see them, so did the law enforcement, so did animal control and some of the other agencies within the county. So I changed that at that time and made it complaint-based, which has functioned much better because it eliminated a lot of the anonymous harassment that was going on between neighbors and utilizing our time as well. The problem is that since that time, I've had different members from the board. I've had people in the community have asked us to be proactive. It doesn't matter to the ordinance department, to myself, how we operate or function. What matters is how the board and how the township sees us as functioning in our department. I did some research around the state, and which I talked to different code enforcement divisions and asked them, how they function. Basically, they operate on a two-tier basis. They have the complaint-based items that they handle by complaint only, and then they have what they call their proactiveness on patrol. And the items that I listed on your courtesy letter, along with some of those that they go out and enforce. You won't see burning on those. We already proactively go after burning and have done so this year for the first time and been successful in shutting down more than 150 of those. So that's already being done. this would be not only but burning, but this would be the additional things that we would be going out to take care of. This would be stuff that we would be driving around looking at. Signs is one of the biggest complaints, too, that we get in the township. And just to share with you, each of you, a little bit here in regards to signs. First and foremost, the ordinance for signs needs to be redone. And I think after I show you this, you'll understand why. What you're going to see is a list of...
Hold on, just wait to talk so that people at home can hear. I'll pass them down. I'll pass them down, buddy.
In driving around doing patrols, this was a list of violators of the sign ordinance in the Bedford Township. These are the businesses and the establishments within the community that are violating these ordinances. The problem is like I said, if you look at the astounding number of them, what that tells me is that at some point in time when that ordinance was originally written, and it's been a while, we've had some new things come on the market that some of these people have chosen to use, one of which is flagpole signs. Our current ordinance doesn't allow flagpole signs. Our current ordinance doesn't allow people to have garage sale signs except in their front yard. We all know that communities around us and even here, we've allowed people, even before I took over this, I seen people with garage sale signs, flagpole signs. Like I said, if you take a look at the locations, I was astonished. And there's even some that were taken down that I've seen in the past that normally had them up. So this is just one of the things, being proactive, we would be going around doing and making sure that these people have permits. If they don't have permits, they're going to have to remove them. But again, you're going to have to look at your ordinance, because I don't think that, in the best interest of the community for some of these people, they're not aware of any of this. They're not aware of it, that they can't have any of this stuff. They look at other communities in the area and they see that they have them and they don't understand that we don't have them. And part of that is education by our department, which we've been doing.
But Damon, you can have them if you get a permit.
No, you can't get a permit.
Because I thought there was a 2-week permit that they could get.
No, there's no permit for those. You can't permit something that's already illegal.
What was that the people came and applied at the planning for when
They can
Shayla
come in
sent
and
out all
they
the
can-
letters?
They can get if you're gonna put out a tablet sign, you're gonna put out an A-pillar sign.
Okay, so you
You're
can-
allowed to come in and get those, okay?
That's what I
You can
think
get
so,
you can get a permit for those, for special events and things like that. But some of the things, like I said, the flag signs, we don't even allow them, so you can't give a permit.
Okay.
Balloons and things like that. Overgrown grass, weeds, things like that. A lot of times driving around, we see vacant houses that are currently under real estate sales or whatever. That property needs to be cleaned up or taken care of. Sometimes we get complaints on that, sometimes we don't. So yes, in regards to that, would it make the community look better if we could go out and make notices? Absolutely. Storage of boats and campers, I believe, is one of the things that we get attacked on all the time, because people will, we get a call and you go into a neighborhood and, they'll say, well, I don't want to complain, because if I do, then my neighbor's going to be mad at me, but, somebody complained about me and there's this one, or I don't want my place looking like an RV village in my community. So this was one of the things, too, that some of the downriver agencies enforced. Sidewalk repairs. We just had issue with this. We've had 2 neighbors go at it over sidewalks. It is the responsibility of the property owners to maintain their sidewalks that's in front of their property, and we do have an ordinance regarding that. This also gets affected by not only the fact that the sidewalks are broken up and not taken care of, but we also find sometimes there's overgrown bushes and plants, which impedes the walking of the sidewalks. We also have the same problem at snow. We've had to do some talking to some of the HOAs, because Some of our HOAs in the community, they pay for snow removal, but what they did is contrary to our ordinance, they didn't know. They set a standard that said if it's 2 inches or more, or 3 inches or whatever, we'll come out and take care of it, but our ordinance doesn't allow that. You gotta get the snow off of there, and there is no 2 or 3 inch grace period there. So that was some of the things. Vehicles blocking sidewalks. We get asked about that. You're not supposed to be parking your vehicles across sidewalks and blocking, again, the traveling for people to walk or people that are handicapped and things of that nature. It's also a state law and can be enforced by the Sheriff's Department and state police as well. So these are the kind of violations that we would be looking at. Now, the type of violations would not change, or that we would not do anything in regards to as far as being proactive, is your blight cases, your junked unlicensed vehicles, your animal complaints that we get, home occupations, surface mining, things of that nature, because we would require a complaint for that. We're going to travel on your property. We're not just driving down the street and observing these types of things and checking on these things. So those are just some of the things that would remain the same, that we're not going to do that. But again, it doesn't matter to me, to our department. We just want to serve the community in the best way we can, and we've heard, like I said, different opinions from the community and from the board members. So tonight, what I'm asking is the board to make your decision based on these, what you would like us to do. If you want us to be proactive on the things that we talked about, doing what we're doing here, or if you want us to remain complaint-based and stay out of the proactiveness.
Okay, comments from board members? Mr. Clemens?
Just a couple. I think it's interesting when you put this list together, because as I look at it, I don't think you have a list of people who knowingly and willingly just said, I'm going to violate the ordinance. I think what's happening is business owners are looking at other very reputable businesses and going, hey, really smart idea, and they follow suit, and next thing you know, we end up with a whole list of violators who, none of which would be violators if we went in, or a lot of them. I think with this, and you and I talked a little bit, Damon, is for me, I have to break this into 2 categories. There's the issue of proactive residentially, and then there's proactive commercially. Residentially, I have some concerns because of individual property rights, use. The public isn't allowed on private property without invitation. Commercial enforcement is different because you do have public use, you have public access, you have public egress. And to me, if we're going to consider proactive at all, my hope would be that we would focus it on health and safety issues. And I think we, even with that, would have to be very tight where we start and grow. I agree with you completely. I think our sign ordinance has to be looked at. It's very problematic. And in full disclosure, one of the things that I had discussed with Damon is it seems like, at least from the communication I see, some of the stories that I've heard, and with Damon saying tonight that signs are one of the biggest complaints, that aligns with what I hear. You get into and I'm going to use Craig if you don't mind. If Craig and I are rival, business owners here in town, and for whatever reason I have a beef with Craig, I call ordinance and say, hey, Craig's doing X. The problem with that is, what about Nancy and Paul who own the similar businesses, but nobody said boo to them? If we're going to look at a pro structure, and I don't know exactly how you do it, so I would admit that up front, but I think there needs to be an element of a window. So let's just say it's a sign. You have a flag sign that you're not allowed to have. Flag signs would be addressed, period, throughout the community, not just at the business of the complaint, because I think that takes away a lot of your targeting that we're seeing between business A and B. That is an extremely simple analogy, and I think real world, there's a lot of caveating that has to be done, and I'm not saying it's that simple in the real world, but I agree that there are some cases for health and safety, parking vehicles across sidewalks, snow removal, 4-foot grass at a tight intersection which obstructs views. Those are reasonable things that I think we have a responsibility from a health and safety standpoint to at least look at. But I think we also have to be mindful that, I at least from what I hear, most residents, I don't think are looking for a real proactive based. And as I think we just have to balance those needs.
I got a couple thoughts, and just, I kind of go back and forth, like, over this whole subject, mainly because I want nothing to do with being nitpicky, looking for, trying to catch, we're out trying to catch people doing something like that we admit people are just doing whatever. It's not bothering anybody. People aren't willing to complain because it's truly not that big of a deal. But at the same time, I don't feel like we want to tie the ordinance officer's hands either for blatantly obvious things that you're seeing out in your day-to-day. But at the same time, you have, I don't know how you do this. How does that stop the, someone calls the ordinance officer and now you're doing anonymous, now you're handling anonymous calls through this because, hey, I called my neighbor, I know you, call hey, my neighbor's got this. You can just stop by and say, oh, well, I was driving through the neighborhood. So that's kind of my initial thoughts while you're talking, and then kind of going through this I kind of see both sides, and I agree with TC of the business and the residential. I feel like that does need, I don't know, again, I'll agree. I don't know exactly how you go about that, but it definitely needs to be looked at. And that's my initial thoughts though, as I feel like don't want to tie your hands, but also I don't think I want to go away from having it be a complaint-based system.
And like I said, for us, that's why this is here. I don't care which way you do it. I just want to have it and be done and put the rest. And then if we have people that say this, the board has made the decision and this is how we're going to operate. And I think if you also read in there that if we are going to do this proactive stuff, I think if you read into what I wrote, this would not be something that we were going to spring on the community all of a sudden. This is, like I said, the problem I find in the community as a whole is just like our sign ordinance and these other ordinances. They lack the education and the knowledge, and I have to agree with TC that many of them people on that list would probably not be on the list, but they were never told that those were violations and those were the things. And what ends up happening is exactly what you said. It becomes a tit for tat over businesses arguing back and forth and picking at one another and that. I believe in equal enforcement across the board. There's no favoritism, there's no friends, and that's how it was in law enforcement, okay?
But two, the board
that's how it is. The complaint-based, like I said, I agree with complaint-based. I changed it. I wanted a complaint-based because the anonymous system wasn't working. It was nothing more than, like I said, I was picking on it. Now, that doesn't say that we haven't had anonymous complaints. You know, if we have somebody who's living next to somebody who's, and haven't been a deputy around here, I can tell you there's a few that are not exactly mentally stable, and they're concerned for their safety and well-being because this individual has such mental capacity that might cause harm or physical harm. We would take that on an anonymous basis because we wouldn't want to see somebody get hurt. But what we tried to eliminate and have eliminated out of this is, like I said, the picking on you type of thing.
Well,
So-
that's part of the reason why this is here tonight, because we have a few complaints right now from residents about businesses with their signs. And we're trying to figure out how we want to move forward now with the signs. Do we enforce? Do we continue to shut down the few businesses that we have complaints on? Or do we let them all go until we rewrite this ordinance? And that's
Well,
why.
and I will tell you, the problem is that you don't,
Hey, sir, listen, you get public comment at the 5-minute mark. You can't just keep hollering. You'll get your time to speak.
the problem is with the businesses is exactly what you said. If I go to your business and I tell you you can't, you as the business owner points the fingers down the street. We inevitably are going to these businesses, to these places. That's why we did the patrol. That's why we went out. That's why I looked at that. That's why I got that list, to make you aware that this isn't just, I don't like the business on my corner, so I'm going to stark out at it. This is all across the township. And it has to be, when you've got this much going on, this is exactly what I see, is most of these people aren't aware of it. I think that they need to be educated. I definitely think that our ordinance needs to be updated, and I know that Nancy and I have talked about this along with planning and Phil, that we need to redo this sign thing because there are some new things that are out there. We certainly don't want to stifle the businesses within our community, to not give them an opportunity to have the same type of travel and growth that other jurisdictions allow their communities. So that's where we're at. So it makes it tough for us to do, because like I said, you've got business owners. When we sent out proactive sign legislation back in the early spring, we had business owners show up and complain that, you know, they have certain hardships, certain things that they need to take care of their business. I'm not in disagreement with whether or not they have a hardship, but at the same time, I can't say, yes, you can, and no, you can't. That isn't the answer.
Ms. Tenenberry?
Well, Phil, I've talked to Phil, I've talked to Tom Graham just last Wednesday. We are working on the sign ordinance, but it's a very, very, very complicated ordinance. I mean, it has to do with all kinds of things, and it's been in place for many years, and it's being revamped, but it's just not going to be overnight. So we just all have to be patient until that can be done, because we've asked him to work on other ordinances too, as this board has seen already. I'm totally in favor of the complaint-based ordinance. It's worked for all these years. It may not seem to an ordinance officer like it works, because you've got all kinds of other issues that come before you, but in my mind, it's worked for many years, and I don't see any reason to make any changes. Courtesy letters, I think, are something that could be looked at, but certainly not switching the whole program from complaint to proactive. So I'm totally in favor of complaint-based.
So, are you saying we shouldn't be proactive with burning? It should be across the board, or are we? I'm saying, because like Damon, right now we're picking and choosing what we're being proactive with, and right now it's burning.
I said I'm not sure what your question is. I said I'm totally for complaint-based. That's complaint-based.
Okay. Mr. Francis?
I guess my view on it is, I guess I am too, but when it's a health or safety hazard issue, like tall grass near a corner, like not shoveling your sidewalks, your neighbors could fall on your property and sue you because they fell on your property. It's a safety issue. I think burning's a safety issue. I guess I'm more inclined to be proactive on safety type issues and stay complaint based on the other issues. For instance, someone parks a camper in their front yard. I wouldn't want one in my neighborhood next to me, but yet if the neighbors aren't concerned enough to complain, why should we?
Mm-hmm.
If they parked a vehicle on a sidewalk, I think that's a safety issue. And really, I'll stop there.
But most of these that are on here are safety issues. You could look at, and that's where it would get tough. You could look at the
You're right.
camper parked in the front yard as a safety issue because you got kids rolling down a sidewalk or down the driveway, and the cars come and can't see them. You could look at signs that are in the road right away, and that's why one of our residents is here tonight, that he can't see when he pulls his car out. You can look at the sidewalks walking down in a neighborhood that they're heaved up 6-8 inches that you could trip on them. So I mean, most of these could be looked at safety issues. Kids are getting hurt going around cars that park on sidewalks. So I get what you're saying, Paul.
That's why it's so hard to legislate
It's tough.
something like this.
It's very tough, and how do you pick and choose which ones you're proactive on, Which one was first, Ms. Tenenberry or Ms. Tenenberry? Go ahead.
Well, the point is, though, if it's bothering you, you don't live there, it shouldn't bother you. If it's bothering the neighbors, they should call and complain. Maybe it doesn't bother them. My neighbor burns. I love the smell of wood burning, fire. Hit the neighbor on the other side. We like it. We're not going to call and complain. and I don't want the ordinance officer coming out there and harassing my neighbors. So, I mean, if it doesn't bother, we have places in our sidewalk that are raised up. I mean, it doesn't bother me. You lift your foot and you step over it. Now, if somebody wants to complain about it, let them call and complain. I don't know how you can pick and choose, because I think that, you know, if somebody has an issue, they need to complain about it and not, you know, go around wanting it to be proactive and have somebody else deal with it, so.
So just so the board is clear, and Craig, I'll get to you. Burning has been cut down
We've
by-
probably shut
by
down
a ton.
150 illegal
By
burns
and,
this year.
and I tell you, in years past, there's times during burning where it was, you couldn't hardly see. So if we're gonna go back to being complaint-based only with burning, it's probably gonna, you know, I mean, 150 burns is a lot. So, you know, we need to be proactive or not. So I agree with you. We can't really pick and choose. Mr. Montre?
I guess I have just a question about like this. So this is a courtesy notice for violation. Is the purpose of this, like, is this an actual, is this a violation? Is this a tick? Is this
This is-
making you aware?
Yes, sir. This is
That you're just-
exactly, right. This is not a violation. That's why I said it's a courtesy notice. It's putting you on notice that while we were in the area, we would have observed or saw something that occurred as one of those things. And it would be checked off, and you would be given notes or time to take care of it. And no, it isn't going on your record. No, it isn't a ticket or a fine. It's trying to, again, it's making you aware that one of these things you're in violation of. Again, I think majority of the people in this township are very, very compliant with everything. I mean, I've went to places and walked up to the door and just talked to them, and they weren't aware that there was such a thing as an ordinance that caused them to be in violation, and once it was explained to them or they were provided a copy of it, they complied like that. Then we have a few in the township that are hardliners, that no matter what you do, we end up in court on. So, I mean, majority of the people, something like this would probably take care of the problem. Again, it's an educational process, and we would never have to go to the next level where it would be an actual complaint, formal complaint, where now we're putting this on here and we're, you know, looking at forcing somebody to do something. But again, it's an education tool, and like I said, we would not be doing these without first putting this out into the media. You know, I spent time this year doing some promo videos that was put out online on different ordinance violations to educate the township on why they are. You know, a lot of people don't understand, you know, they say, well, why do we have to have ordinances? And the reason we have them is to protect the property rights of the people that have their property and that you purchased. If we didn't have ordinances and zoning laws within the community, your purchase of your $200,000 home could end up being next to somebody who just as much values his property, but he turns it into a junkyard. So now your $200,000 investment just dropped. And when that kind of stuff starts happening within the community and you start losing property values, not only does your property value get hurt, but so does the school system. So does the system as far as businesses, because when you apply for grants and they look at your school systems and they look at your deteriorated neighborhoods and stuff like that, you're not going to get those. So having a strong ordinance and an enforcement and doing it the right way and educating the community only makes the community stronger and makes you available to get the grants and the things that you need. So, but like I said, this isn't something that we want one way or the other. I don't care. I just want the board to make a decision so that we have something standard to go by. If this is something you like, we can do it, try it out, see how it works. If you don't, that's fine as well, because we're still doing what we do, which is complaint-based, and that's how we handle it.
Mr. Clements?
I actually pulled back my question. He in a roundabout way answered it, so I'm
Okay.
okay with it. Thank you.
I mean, part of the thing that's bothersome to me tonight is there's 3 businesses on here that have complaints on them that are gonna have to take down their signs. And my point to Ms. Tinberry is, if you guys are working on this right now, is part of the ordinance gonna allow signs? So if it's going to, I'm saying all of these wouldn't be in violation is what I'm saying. And if that's the case, you know, do we want to be shutting down some of these businesses that have the signs up, you know, that we have complaints on right now?
No, we're not gonna shut down any business, we're trying to be proactive for business, but we can amend the ordinance around whatever it is. I mean, maybe, I don't know what it is, but maybe it's something that was age-old and in the past, and like the highway signs that are up there 6 miles in the air, you know, those aren't allowed anymore, but we still have some of them. It doesn't mean that they have to close their business down, it means that they have to comply within a certain amount of time. I mean, when it comes around, there will be adjustments that people may need to make, but it's not gonna close, nobody's gonna close their business.
Well, I
because
didn't
of a
say
sign.
close business, I meant
You
require
said
them to
shut
take
them
their
down.
signs down. I didn't mean it to come
Oh.
out like that. I meant just require them to take their sign down. Like right now, we have a business that's a newer business that has 3 flag signs up we have a complaint on. So are we either gonna make them take those signs down, or is the ordinance that's coming going to,
Don't you think most businesses will want to comply with this? I don't know. The attorneys are writing it up at this point, and we don't have that, you know, final draft or even a preliminary draft to review it yet, but, you know, I can't imagine someone who, if they know it violates the ordinance, wouldn't want to comply with the ordinance.
no, they would, but I'm saying, like he's saying, you've got 47 of them on here that are all out of compliance, yet I've gotta take mine down, and, you know, restaurant down the street has it up. But nobody complained about them, so they get to have it up. And I'm saying if the ordinance is changing to allow those.
Maybe that guy could complain.
Any more comments or questions?
Mr. Chairman, if this is I'm sorry, go ahead, Judy.
I've talked to Damon, he knows how I feel, I like the complaint base. If someone has a problem, complain, or better yet, go talk to your neighbor and see if you can work it out yourselves.
Exactly.
I'm really not in favor of the proactive, because I know some of my neighbors, we don't care. We don't care what they do, it's their yard, it's not bothering us, it's not any safety issues, we don't care. So I would feel bad if it's going around and my neighbors are all coming to me going, what, did you turn me in? Who turned me in? Somebody turned me in. There's no way this is working like this anymore. I don't mind signs being taken off of telephone poles. I don't care if you do that. That doesn't take anything but getting out of your car, pulling one down. Signs in road right-of-way. There's a lot of signs in the road right-of-way. You pull those, we used to have someone just pull those, and people would come to the township and pick them back up, and we'd tell them then.
Some of those are
You can't.
businesses, just so you know. Those aren't just random signs, like I said. Some of those are businesses that are on that list.
And I think they were back then. They just came and picked them back up, and we told them, well, they were in the road right-of-way, you can't have them there. Here's your sign back. Make sure it's not in the road right-of-way this time. I'm not in favor of a proactive. I like the complaint base. I think it works well. I realize what we're talking about, the burning. I understand that helped. Burning doesn't bother me, but I know it bothers other people in the township. That's a really touchy subject in this township.
You are correct.
But we need to decide, though, whether or not we're gonna move forward being proactive with burning, because if we don't, we need to lay off 2 people. Because that's all they're hired for, is for burning right now. And this township hired the 2 people because of, go proactive with burning. And
Well,
made
just
them
keep in
part-time.
mind, if you're gonna do that, the fire department would be responding to our absences for burns. And that was the reason that we brought those people on, is so.
But
the
either
fire
we're
department would
proactive
be-
or we're not. I mean,
Well-
I keep hearing wishy-washiness up here about, well, let's do this, but let's not do that. Either we are or we're not. And you have a list here of things we can pick from, you know, which I think, like Mr. Francis said, are safety issues, but, you know, I think we need to decide, because there's a lot riding on it. You've got a few complaints outstanding. Ms. Stenberg?
I believe we could be proactive with the burning because there are people with health issues that it bothers, but I don't think that means we have to be proactive for the total thing. If the proactive with the burning is working, then you go with what's working.
Do you think you have to be across the board for both? You think, or is that what you're saying? You don't think you can be proactive for one and not for another?
No, you can. I'm just saying, I'm hearing a lot of, well, just take the signs down off the poles or take them off the road right-of-ways, or, I think he needs a clear answer of what you want him to do. And that's, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Okay, if we want to just be proactive with burning, then just be proactive with burning. It is working, people love it. But I'm saying as far as signs goes, you know, it'd be nice if, you know, there's a few things that you could be proactive on.
Well, as far as signs, I think it's premature right now without our sign ordinance.
But you have complaints right now with
And it's
signs.
complaint-based, so he can still go out on those complaints.
And our ordinance department has been doing it for years.
But too, keep in mind, you know, we get phone calls every single day, Damon and I, about, you know, a complaint about somebody when they find out they gotta turn their neighbor and they don't wanna do it. Or when they do it, you get the wars going on. So I mean,
Well,
you know, you
That's
don't
why
see
it's
a lot
that
of,
way, though. That's why it's that way, is if it's a big enough deal, if it's putting your children in danger, you're not gonna care if your neighbor's mad at you. That's why it's that way, is if it's a big enough deal, you're gonna complain. If it's just you're being like, oh, I guess it's not that big of a deal. It's not, you said if you can't talk to your neighbor, it's kind of on you from the get.
I'm fine with it. I'm just saying the board needs to make a clear decision. That way it's not Damon just kind of arbitrarily saying, well, we'll enforce this, but not that. And that's kind of what's been.
Trudy, when you were saying that they would just pull the sign, was that an ordinance officer being proactive, or was that there's a complaint, they go pull a sign, you're not allowed to have that, or?
Signs on poles?
Well, like for your example, you were just saying
Right
they'd have to
away.
come pick them up. Was that a complaint? Was that complaint-based, or like they're?
They're both.
Okay.
I mean, I was just saying that if this board was gonna do anything, I'd be okay with that, but the rest of it, you know,
Well,
if we have to
that's-
stay complaint-based, I'd vote complaint-based, just
I
across the
would,
board.
yeah, if you gotta go
complaint-based.
one way or the other, I would too. That's what, like, I'd also feel like there's stuff that's like, would be blatantly obvious to an ordinance officer and just be like, why would they not be able to say, like, drop a memo, you know what I mean? Or, okay, that's in the right of way, I can pull that and take it over here, that they have that authority without,
I want to offer up a radical solution. And that is that, first off, I like this letter. What I was looking for to hear was what was your intent? And what I was hoping not to hear is that this was the beginning of a citation process. And that's what I heard, that's what I was looking for. This is literally more than being a good neighbor. And saying, hey neighbor, guess what? You probably didn't realize that this is a violation. We just want to give you a heads up. And if that's what this is, I think other than a couple of stylistic things to it, I think it's a good letter. I think it's absolutely, I know for a fact that there's businesses in this community that you've gotten out and said, hey, FYI, there's a problem with your sign. You've been able to explain it, get it resolved, and guess what? Sign's still there. It's just in a different location. Everybody, and I think that's ultimately, it goes back to our law enforcement days. You know, you can write or you can be proactive and give people, you can educate. And ultimately, I like educating before we enforce. I think it's a good thing.
Yep.
What I was going to say is if the board is agreeable, why wouldn't we utilize this letter for 60 days? And let's come back and see what this list looks like in 60, 90 days. Because it's gonna tell us very quickly where and if there really is a problem, or did we get a high degree of voluntary compliance simply because people didn't know? But I don't think this is we have to decide here tonight, period, we're all in or we're all out.
I think it'd be nice to table it either way, and, you know, till we have a full board. But yeah, I think the letter, just informing them, most of them would probably correct it.
And I particularly congratulate you for taking the let's educate before we enforce attitude. I particularly like that approach.
So you're saying use the letter, but don't enforce.
I'm saying the letter is a courtesy to let people
Period.
know, yeah, hey, we saw this
Period.
and just wanted to let you know that it's not compliant. You know, you might caveat down here that, you know, ordinance in Bedford is complaint-based. This is not a citation. I mean, you know, there could be something to that effect.
Well, we would.
But I know as a business owner, if I got this letter in the mail, my first reaction isn't gonna be, how dare you? It's gonna be, I didn't realize.
Or,
And then I'm forced to make a decision as a business owner.
Well, just
or
so
it could be, I got the letter, but I know they don't enforce. so I'm not going to correct.
Well, no, just so
Well,
you
yeah.
understand, I mean, just like the letter, like you said, sending it out, I would rather, okay, make contact with these people, you know, person to person. I mean, going up to the door and talking, like I said to him, the ordinance department is compliance. That's what we're all about here, is achieving it, compliance. And a lot of, like I said, most of the people in the community are compliant when they're aware that there's a situation. And a lot of times, like I said, we don't always have, you know, we get a complaint on something, we may not generate a complaint based on the fact that we'll go out there and meet with the individual and talk to them and get it resolved. There are situations where, you know, we go out there, there's nobody there, we can't make contact, then yes, we'll generate a complaint because we got one and send it to them. But the nice thing about what you were seeing and what you were saying is exactly correct. If I can go to the businesses within the community, supply them this and a copy of our ordinance that's letting them know this is what the ordinance is. Because like I said, a lot of the people in the community are unaware of what the ordinances are in this township. I lived here and I didn't know that either, to some of them. So that is what the letter is about. It's not an action against the property. It's not we're not trying to take them to court. We're not writing a citation. This is merely a notification that you are not compliant with this particular order.
Yeah. And I think, Paul, to answer your question, someone who's not going to comply isn't going to apply with 7 letters or 8 letters, or they're just not going to comply.
Right.
But I think the one variable that I don't know, so if I had to vote tonight, the piece of missing information to me is if we educate, when we're done educating, what is the degree of noncompliance? And if it's really small, then we deal with it the way we're dealing with it. If it is a big problem, then we may have to shift gears and deal with a big problem. But I just don't think we're there yet to know how in fact we need to respond.
Sir, you'll get public comment. Hey, sir, let us do our business. You'll get public comment. Anybody else have any comments or questions for Damon? Okay, thank you, Damon.
You're welcome.
Okay, moving on to 8G, development of a capital improvement plan. Ms. Tinneberry put together a letter and some information. Did everybody get the letter she emailed? I think the wrong information was in the actual packet, so she emailed it, and I think we all got it in a timely manner. So Ms. Tinneberry, would you like to?
It wasn't actually wrong information, it's just that an old lady, when you click on the attachment, I hit the wrong button, clicked on the wrong thing, so I'm confessing.
Blame it on the machine, huh?
No, when I clicked on it, I said. So I noticed that when I got my packet that Trudy put in just what I sent. And so I sent you all out the memo that I was hoping to attach in the first place. And again, I'd just like this to be a discussion. However, if we feel that this is a direction we want to go in, I'd like some movement so we could get started. But I just want to read to you a portion of the memo. It says, since the board approved funding, which we did during the budget time, for a capital improvement plan, I'm asking the board to review and approve the following recommendation. I'd like to see us form an ad hoc committee, meaning that it will not be ongoing once the capital improvement plan is in place, except for maybe if we want to have someone work on changes in the future. Form an ad hoc committee for the purpose of developing a capital improvement plan. The committee would consist, and this again, suggestion, of 6 members, 2 from planning, 2 from the township board, 2 from the public who have background in construction and government and management, that kind of thing. And then I'd like to see us hire Dennis Jenkins as a consultant, since he was Bedford's planning coordinator for many years. He has extensive knowledge in capital improvement plans. He's done a lot of research on it. And he has a desire, since he sought to move previous boards into developing a capital improvement plan. He's wanted to see this for 10 years, and he said if it happens, he would die a happy man. And he's already on the payroll as a consultant in the planning department, used periodically. I'd also like to set a designated time frame for the capital improvement ad hoc committee to return with a proposed and then a final plan. MCL, which is the state law, 125.3865 states, "A planning commission, after adoption of a master plan," which we have, "shall annually prepare a capital improvement plan of public structures and improvements. The capital improvement plan can be developed by our own people, since there are extensive documents, guidelines, and examples to follow online through MTA and other websites such as the Governmental Finance Officers Association. Developing a capital improvement plan for Bedford Township is clearly the responsibility of the appointed planning commission, and I believe it would be irresponsible to pass off this important plan to a contracted company." So I'm offering this suggestion. I don't think it's difficult, looking at I don't know if you did read the other accidental attachment, but it gives a laid out, easy plan on developing a capital improvement plan. There's a lot of other background information. There's several capital improvement plans that other townships and cities have developed as examples online and through MTA. And I just think it would be something that those who have been elected and appointed in Bedford Township should be engaging in, rather than an outside company.
Nancy, being a longtime board member, why didn't we take Mr. Jenkins' capital improvement plans for all those years? What was the reason? Because as a newer guy around here, it's frustrating seeing everything we have and nothing is budgeted for.
My opinion is that the boards that I sat on did not want to create the funding. The funding in those days wasn't as plentiful as it is now, and they didn't want to take the time to create that kind of funding in the budget, and so each year it got passed over. And we never had any real catastrophes. That recently we've had the maintenance garage, whatever it's called now, I'm not sure, but we've had that. We've had some issues with the fire department, one on Temperance Road, Temperance Road. So now we're at a point where we are really late getting started, but I think that nonetheless we should get started. I just think previous boards didn't see the importance of it and didn't feel they had the funding for it. But we're funding now, and we've committed to funding it every year, putting additional funds in.
Yeah, I agree. I think this board needs to take this, what we're doing, extremely serious, and every single thing that this township has, buildings, parks, everything has a life expectancy, and we have to budget for everything. The park equipment. Eventually, that $100,000 equipment at car park's going to need to be replaced at some point. You know, so I agree with you 100%. We've taken proactiveness, and we did create the budgets for maintenance for vehicles for the maintenance workers and for the township. We put a large amount of money in there. But now we need to create the plan, and I want to make sure whatever we do is right. There's a lot of options. I've been talking with Mannik Smith. They create CIPs. It's an option. Rudolph Libby and Gem Group. What they do is a little bit different. They explained it at the last meeting. They give the big picture. I just want to make sure whoever we're having come in and inspect all of our equipment, they are professionals. They can give us that, hey, that HVAC has 10 years left. We need to make sure that, that stuff is spot on and we can budget properly for it. It's, same thing with the park equipment. We need to have, the only thing right now, with as far as saving for the future is the fire department with the millage that was passed for the equipment. But if the millage doesn't pass in 10 more years from now, then there's really not a plan for the fire equipment. So I think really what we need to do at some point probably is to have a special meeting and really go over all the information and all of our options and really put out a real plan of what we want to do and how it looks moving forward. Mr. Francis?
I agree with Nancy's comment on why it is that previous boards haven't accomplished this funding. The other issue is this is not easy. This is hard to do if you do it the right way. It's hard to do. It's almost like forced savings on someone. I think it should be done. We've made one big step, I think, when we developed the 5-year plan for our roads. That's an asset management plan. That's a capital improvement plan. Only on one isolated area, our roads. There are a lot of other needs, and I think we all agree there are a lot of other needs. And equipment and buildings do not last forever. But this is hard to do, and I think that's why previous boards may have shied away from it, because it's hard to do. That doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. I'm total support that we should do it.
But still, though, Paul, like you say with the roads, yes, we have the 5-year asset management plan, which is great. It's working well for us. I think it's keeping us on track, but we still don't budget for roads out 10 years out.
Well,
you know what I'm saying? We every year we have so much money that we just pull out of our general fund or whatever that we have, allocated for that, and that's what we are able to use. But we don't say, hey, Crab Road in 10 years is going to need to be redone, and that's a $400,000 job. How are we properly budgeting for that?
well, that's what our 5-year asset plan does.
Yeah.
Is it projects the needs in the future, 5 years out, maybe even longer on some projects.
But I'm saying we're not budgeting for them.
I think we really are. We have for the last 5 years, haven't we? And I think we ought to continue that. I hope future boards see the wisdom in having a plan. If you aim at nothing, you're going to hit it every time. We can't afford that. We owe the people here a better effort in that.
Ms. Tinneberry?
I don't know what Paul's definition of hard is. I guess you can look at it all different
Difficult.
ways instead
Difficult.
of hard. Yeah, I mean, difficult because, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, I'm just going to say what went through my mind. Difficult because we don't have intelligent enough people to be able to put it together, or 2 people from planning, 2 people from the board, 2 people, I mean, Barry lives in the community, he's welcome to be a volunteer on the 2 people from the public. I'm saying that we do not have to spend money to put the plan together. I'm certainly not saying that any of the people on this committee would do the estimates of what needs to be done. I got from Dave Manning the list of our assets, capital assets, and you take them one at a time and you put the plan together. There's a reason that the law says 2 people from planning. The law doesn't say anything about who you appoint to planning, what kind of credentials. They could be anybody. They can be, babysitters, they can be farmers, they can be construction. There's no criteria for the people you have on planning, but the law says it's the planning commission that, after adopting a master plan, shall put together a capital improvement plan. So I think that we need to give our planning commission and our board members and our lay people, if that's what you want to call them, a chance before we put out, we've just started funding our capital improvement plan. I would hate to see the money that we're putting out for capital improvements to go to some firm, company, excuse me, Barry, but that helps people do this. I mean, if we had, endless finances, I don't know, I still can't see spending the money that way, but this is putting together the plan. And once the plan is together, then the estimation of these different capital assets could be done by getting estimates from people. I mean, you've had estimates of the fire station without having to pay for the estimate. And again, if you look online in the MTA, there's lots and lots of townships that have put their capital improvement plan out there, and who does it say developed it? 2 people from planning, 2 people from the board, not anybody that has you know, a company that does this to take the, I think we should try it before we run scared and say we can't do it, it's too hard. And I don't mean that that's what
No,
you're
no, I
saying.
wasn't saying that at all. I
I'm
wasn't saying
saying
that at all.
that, to me, hard is just, hard means it's gonna take some work. I'm willing to put the work in, I'm willing
But-
to,
But just keep in mind, I mean, hiring Dennis Jenkins at $50 an hour, if it takes 6 months, that's gonna cost money too. What I'm saying is we need to put all of our options together and take a look at it and see what's best for us. I don't know how much it's gonna cost Mannik Smith to put together a CIP. It might be cheaper than hiring Dennis Jenkins out.
we don't have to hire
And
Dennis
Man-
Jenkins.
I'm just saying.
He could be one of the two from the public.
I'm telling
I'm
you,
just saying,
Dennis Jenkins, this is my idea, Dennis Jenkins
pending,
would
yeah.
do it free because he wants it done so badly for the township.
I'm saying, I mean, he's not. It's gonna cost us to have him
No.
do it.
No, this is just my opinion. He said he's willing to do it, so we can take that off the table.
Okay.
We don't have to
And
hire
then,
Dennis.
and then Rudolph Libby's is free, the first assessment, so I mean, we obviously need to take a look at what they're willing to do too. I think that's why I say, as far as a special meeting, you know, put all of our options out there and really discuss and what we want this to look like. This is something, obviously, we need a budget for, and I think Mr. Francis didn't mean that this is hard. I think he meant that this is hard to budget for, and that's why it wasn't ever done. I mean, obviously, it's not that hard because Mr. Jenkins did it for 10 years and we never adopted it. Or not we, the past boards never adopted it. So it's something that, I mean, he did it when he was working here. He put together the CIP, didn't he, Ms. Hirschberger?
He didn't
Mr.
have
Jenkins
CIP,
put together,
He worked on putting a CIP together, yes,
But
but
we
none of
didn't,
the
that
boards.
board didn't adopt any
No.
CIP.
that's what I'm saying.
Correct.
As far as it being hard, it's been done.
Yes,
It's not like it's never been done around here. We just
correct.
never took it and did anything with it.
Maybe I can clear up what Mr. Francis was trying to say. When I meant it's hard, it's a useless activity to create a plan and do nothing with it. You have to fund it. That's the hard part. Selling the community that this is something that we just need to do. That's, to me, the hard part and why we haven't done it.
I agree with that. I would
But-
like to hear with other board members though, too, not, I mean, I appreciate your opinion.
No,
just would
I
like to
mean,
hear
whoever wants
from-
to speak, I mean, the bottom line at the end of the day is less roads will be funded. You know, it's just like right now, we're dealing with the situation with the fire department. How are we gonna fund it? It's $500,000. You know, we're gonna have to look at taking it out of the general fund. That's $500,000 less on roads that year, so.
Well,
Anybody else have any?
Might I just say to that, I can remember back in 2012 when I first ran for this trustee's job, and everybody wanted a millage or a special assessment or something, and I contended that we had the money in the fund balance, and we haven't had a millage or special assessment in the last, going on 8 years. So I think that if you live right, the money will be there.
But you're right, and you're right, but if we didn't spend all that money, we'd have $500,000 for the fire department too, though. So I mean, that was the rainy day fund. Obviously, there was too much in there, and that's why we've been able to spend so much on roads, but
Rather than shovel more smoke on this issue, why don't we agree to bring something back at the next meeting on how we're gonna do this?
I personally think you need to hold a special meeting.
Well,
Uh,
I'm not saying we shouldn't.
That's what, if I was gonna say anything, I
Yeah,
would say
'cause
I
you-
agree with both of you that I think you already have the Rudolph Libby GEM group gonna give us a free assessment. I think this makes tons of sense, but I also think there's a lot of variables and a lot to discuss and a lot of smoke to shovel, that I would think it would be like something that needs its own separate meeting to really dive into.
And in the interim, we can get information from Mannik Smith. We can hopefully have something from Rudolph Libby and then a better, more solid plan of what this is gonna look like too.
I think we also have to keep in mind what the state mandates us to do.
But you can
And-
do all this with that, you know.
As long as the planning commission,
Right here, Cascade Charter
That's
Township
it.
in Kent County, Michigan. I mean, Barry Bushman, they just did Tecumseh. you know, with, I mean, you can still have, you know, this whole commission, what you're talking about, or board, ad hoc board, and still have, you know, outside
What-
professionals, you know.
You mentioned that, I don't know what that is.
It's just some information I got from Cascade Charter Township Capital Improvement Program that they did
Where did you get it, online or?
online.
Okay.
And then,
And I think what that is just like we did the master plan. We formed this committee for the master plan, because state mandates it, but then we hired Mannik Smith to help us with it. I believe it's the same thing. If we want to bring in a company, we can to help, but state mandates, we have to follow this. That doesn't mean we can't bring in somebody else to help, but we have to follow what the state tells
yeah,
us we have to do.
I'm not opposed to moving forward with something like that. I just want to, you know, I think we need to know exactly what we want. And if it's state mandated, I guess we could.
Well, to me, the only reason that we would hire outside professionals is to supplement what our in-house people cannot do. Whether they don't have the experience or the expertise, we want it done right. And if we have to hire an outside firm to help us in certain areas, fine, but that's the only thing. I'm not looking for a firm to hand us a document and the board signs on it and says, oh, it's done. I don't think that's what we should do. I think the planning commission really is supposed to do it by statute. I don't know if that's the way it should be. I know it's what the law says, because, you know, who do you have on your planning commission? You don't know.
I'm on it.
Well, I'm not, I meant the people that might have the expertise and the portfolio to do this. So I do think it needs to start in-house, for sure. And I think we ought to get moving on that.
I agree. The bottom line is, I think everybody on this board agrees that this needs to happen. I just think it just needs to be done right, so. Want to table it for next meeting, or is?
Nancy brought it. What do you?
I'm not tabling it, no. I gave you my opinion. I mean, no, I'm not tabling it.
Mr. Clements?
There's nothing in Ms. Tenneberry's request that prohibits or binds or limits anything that Rudolph Libby has set to do. It's a committee that we need to initiate. We decided to set funds aside because we felt like it was relevant. The law says we need to keep moving with it. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of discussions about the depth of this capital improvement plan. You know, you'll notice the law says we have to have one, but as I read the law, there's very little as far as the mandatory pieces, how far you have to drill down. So I think we've got a lot of work internally to figure it out. I would be supportive that we need to look at moving forward with this committee and looking at assignments, whether Mr. Jenkins needs to be involved immediately as a paid consultant or would be agreeable as someone who would steer it for the first month to be sure it starts correctly. I can't speak for him, but I don't think Nancy's assessment is very far off. But I don't think tabling it to another meeting does anything than just quintessentially pushes it off because nobody really wants to make a decision. We've already made a decision. We agreed to, let's put a commission.
Was that in the form of a motion?
If you'd like it to be, I'll make it in the form of a motion.
Sure.
I move that per the agenda item 8G, that the township board forms a CIP plan committee that would consist of 6 members, 2 from planning, 2 from the township board, 2 from the public who have a background in construction, government, or management. That board would meet within the next 30 days upon approval of this board, and then we have to go from there as far as what kind of directives that committee will have.
Support.
Okay, motion supported by Ms. Tenneberry. Discussion?
Who appoints that board?
This board.
This board?
This board.
So,
It's like every other committee. Paul appoint, we approve.
Okay, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 6-0. Okay, item 8H, purchase of 3 counter computers from IT Right. Ms. Hirschberger?
As the memo explains, we had 3 of the counter computers crash last week. It was a bad patch by the Windows 7. These are 3 computers that we did not replace when we replaced 21 of our computers back a couple years ago. So I had IT Right give me a quote for the same computers just to replace the 3 counters. The one in the clerk's department completely crashed. I took an old computer and got that up and running just so we had something for right now. IT Right was able to get the 2 tax department computers back up and running, but with Windows 7, it's probably going to happen again. These computers are too old to upgrade to Windows 10, so the cost of the computers is $2,010. That's $670 each. I did look around for comparatives to get a lower price. I could not find one, but I did go out and look.
Okay, comments or questions? Seeing none, I look for a motion.
Motion to approve the purchase of 3 PC Basic computers from IT Right at a total price of $2,010.
Support.
Okay, motion is supported by Ms. Tinnevery. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Hirschberger votes aye. Ms. Tinnevery?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 6-0. Item 8I, resolution to close Dean Road between Monroe Road and Freeman Street for Fire Prevention Day.
This is a resolution, as we have done in the past. The one exception is they are not closing down Freeman Street. In the past, they have closed that down too. This will only be Dean Road from Monroe to Freeman, so traffic will still be able to come down Dean and go down Freeman and exit out onto Summerfield. So I'd like to make a motion that we approve the resolution for the Bedford Fire Department Station 2 road closure for Fire Prevention Day.
Support.
Okay, motion is supported by Mr. Clements. Discussion?
Got a question.
Mr. Francis?
The second page in the document we have is called a traffic control plan, and the time of the day is different than the other one. Is it supposed to be different, or?
It's supposed to be a little bit different, so they have some time to put up
Okay, no problem.
block signs and take them down, and usually it happens about the same time, but we always give them a little extra time just in case they need it.
Could you call the roll, please?
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Ms. Tinnevery?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 6-0. Item number 9, comments from the public. Comments limited to 5 minutes for each individual. Come on up. Just state your name and address, please.
James, I live on 1030 Sycamore Lane.
Could you pull the microphone down, please?
This is James, I live at 1030 Sycamore Lane. Anyhow, I've been complaining about these signs for years, and Trudy, she took care of the one sign. The guy had it changed, the jeweler store had it chained to the pole for 2 years. Big 5x8 sign on the trailer, chained to the pole for 2 years. I couldn't get one ordinance guy to do anything about it. Finally, I asked her about it, and she called the ordinance guy down. It was down the next day, and it was disappeared. Now, why ain't these ordinance people doing their job? I call every friggin' day on there, and they won't do their job. They won't say anything. They won't call you back. They just like, it's their friends. They won't do anything. They got friends that do it. Why is it got to put signs right out in the middle of the freeway? Lewis Avenue is a freeway when we come out of there. It's a dead-end road we live on. It's only a way we can get out. I wait there 15 minutes to turn left. Otherwise, you got to turn right, then go down there and turn around and come back the other way, get on the road. It's so busy through there, and you people don't care. They're allowed to put signs there. Where's our rights? The taxpayers here. Those people. That guy lives from Ohio. He ain't from here. It's all right to put his hemp signs right there, big old flags, hemp, CBD oil, come and buy me. I mean, he's got. If you look at his signs, it looks like Vegas. He's got neon signs in every window. He's got signs taped to his in there, CBD oil, hemp oil. I mean, why he's he got to have all the signs out in the right of way and out there? I know you got the bushes cut down, but there was even something on the zoning that says the sign can't be no more than 2 foot over grade. That means no more than 12 inches high. That sign ain't allowed to be no more than 12 inches high. But they're allowed to put 3-foot signs in there. You know, we pull up there, if we can't see them, the cars can't see us coming out of there. They can't see us. And it's been going on for years and years and years. And I know I give you guys a headache, you especially, about this, but they won't do anything. They just don't do anything. They won't say anything. When I asked Pitson in there, she said she'd go over there. She never did. The next day, must have called him up, tell him put more signs out there. Because next thing he had these big old flag signs right out there again. Yeah, that guy's down there, but he knows better because I taped the signs to his window and Bedford Inc. to let him know that about the ordinance. And they still do it. So it ain't like they don't know it. It's been going on for year after year after year after year. And I had, the only one that actually did anything, the only supervisor, no one than you, but there's a Wilburn guy was in there. He was the only one that got that taken care of. Because that guy in that jewelry store, he had a sign there for over years. It was a billboard sign. Right there, it said there, they wouldn't do anything about it. And then all of a sudden, the bushes grew over, and you guys got those cut down, but they don't do regular maintenance on them. I got to call them and complain about it all the time, but they ain't doing anything about these signs. Now they're putting out more signs out there. And you guys won't do nothing about it. It's been gone over 10 years now. Ain't something I just started saying, calling these complain about this, but there ain't nobody doing anything, especially in our right of way. Why we gotta have bushes and signs right in our right of way to get out on the freeway? That's an harassment. I mean, I'm paying my taxes. This guy, then you got all these people living here with Ohio plates on here. I don't know if I live in Ohio or Michigan. I mean, there ain't nothing gonna get done around here. You guys got your own little pet projects. You guys are, yeah, we're gonna vote on that today, but this sign issue, this has been going on for years. It ain't like I just brought this up. I don't care if they have signs, but they're 12 inches, like the ordinance, like that says in your guys' own paperwork here, up there in the zoning. They're not allowed to be no more than 12 inches high. Why do they gotta have all these signs out there anyhow? How many people come over there buying hemp oil and diamonds, and, I mean, why do they gotta be out in the road, is what I wanna know. Why didn't they just, what's wrong with on their building, where they're supposed to be? It ain't like they're just in there, they're temporary signs, they're out there almost all the time, and then they get further out in the road, and you guys, they won't do one thing about it. And it's already in there, it's not allowed to be in the right of way, and the signs can't be no more than 12 inches. But yet they okay, you guys okay them. There shouldn't be no signs, period. But yet, I know there was a guy down there, had that one restoration shop, he ain't there no more, but he put a sign out there, and they come over there and they ticketed him. I said, really? I go, this jewelry store over there, man, they had a sign there for 2 years, they wouldn't do anything. That's all I got.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Any more comments from the public?
Joe Garvick, 2740 Concert Road, Lambertville, Michigan. I was sitting home and I seen the thing about, the signs and everything else, and I had, and Paul can testify, I bought a piece of property off of Wiseman Road, and property sat there for years and years. And I went to all the neighbors and I asked them, I said, they butt up to my property and they have a gate. I said, do me a favor, I got a complaint, I gotta clean this up, it's not my stuff, but I will clean it up, thank you. And throw your sticks, throw your branches and everything. 9 of them was absolutely great. The one gentleman come into the township probably 4 or 5 times, complaining, pulled my stakes out from a survey. I called Mannik Smith and I said, or not Mannik, I'm sorry, Warnke, and asked him to come out and put it, and they said, we would love to, but will you call the police? So I did that, and we had 2 officers come out there, or, I'm sorry, 1 officer and 2 people from here, and if that policeman wouldn't have been there, I think there would have been violence. There's a body camera on. He threatened to come over and shoot all my animals at the zoo. I walked around the barn, he threatened to kill me. I went up to the township, to the court, filled out the paperwork the next morning. And I think that, there's issues out there. You gotta watch what's going on. Thank goodness Paul Peroni had some foresight and said, I'm gonna get a policeman out there because of what he's been saying in our offices, and to Damon Cecil. So I just, it's a tough deal out there. The ordinance people, I don't think, are they allowed to carry guns, Paul? Are you guys?
No.
No. And I just think that situation would have been awful. And when he threatened to do all that, he did it in front of the Deputy Krupp, and he goes, you're an idiot, I'm filming it all. So if anybody wants to listen to it. And then I go home that night, and he puts a Facebook of my 3 daughters, a picture of it, to me. And I went, enough's enough. So I think that this deal, this ordinance deal, I think it has to be addressed. I think the sign issue has to be addressed. I would love, we got some smart attorneys here, and sit down, and I'll give you an example. I sit on the planning board, and you go out and you got Forest View Lanes that can't have a sign, but if we went by their sign ordinance, you couldn't even see it because they sit in a hole. So we have to have a little leeway and say, look, this sign needs to sit up even with the road, and do it. You got the next guy that it doesn't block anybody on where the strip is on where all the restaurants are in the new Smokehouse 45. I didn't have an issue voting for that in the middle. It doesn't affect anybody. I think there's a lot of common sense. But when it blocks somebody like this gentleman said and stuff, I mean, there's an issue. But that sign ordinance, and I could be wrong, I think I've heard it for 5, 6, 7 years. We need to do something with it. It's a 4x8, and here's the rules. And I just think we need to address that. And I think these ordinance officers need, because you never know what you're going into. And I really fear, for the 2 ordinance officers that went there the other day. They actually asked me to leave, and I said fine, because he was so upsetting and threatening. So I think it's just a touchy deal. I think when you say it's complaint-based, this guy gets it, and then he goes, who did it? And I'm going to start making complaints. I think it snowballs. So I think you need to look at that. I think, we got a great board. One last thing, I think what Paul said, when you're a homeowner, you're a business, you budget for what you have. I really think you need to budget and have it, because there's nothing worse than coming up and saying, we need 200,000, 500,000. I love that concept that when we're doing it. I don't know much about other townships and stuff, but if money can be put away, it's a lot easier for you guys when somebody says, oh my gosh, where are we going to get that? And so that's all I got to say, but I thank the ordinance officers and stuff like that, but things happen out there, but when you cross the line, when you start threatening my kids and stuff, it's a little too much. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Any more comments from the public?
Lamar Frederick, 3254 Deer Creek Drive in Lambertville. Ordinance officers, ordinance complaints. It's been around for 50 years. The difficulty that I have heard this evening is that the ordinances are not applied consistently across the piece, that some people are not given due process, they're not given equal protection, and we heard tonight, right here, 2 different people with different issues that arise out of ordinance enforcement. This is nothing new. It's been around since many of us on the board. And of course, council have been involved in a lot of cases. But if you go to the courthouse and you have not applied due process, equal protection, the guy up the street got away with it, why am I here? The judge doesn't like to hear that. So you need to really be careful about, well, we're going to be proactive here, but we're going to be complaint-based over here, and we're going to be something else in the 4th place. Just be consistent across the piece. Second thing, I came tonight principally to hear the report on the Michigan Tavern on your phase 2. I was particularly interested as to whether or not the engineer would determine it is a facility. That is a dangerous term. And it is absolutely imperative, as council has already said, that you establish that baseline, that it be part of the sale process, that it become part of the record, because you are responsible for any changes thereafter, period, end of report. So you should not go forward until that is fully established, as council has already said. I've also heard comments tonight about how much you have invested in this roundabout at this time with the property, using your own documents, but I didn't hear about the $5,000 until tonight. You've got nearly $90,000 in this already. If you were to close today, would be about 85. You have not had anything to do with the demolition yet. You have had nothing to do with establishing the easement that's necessary. You haven't, because I understand the road commission saying, we will only take an easement. We don't want the property. You will be a perpetual owner of the dirt underneath that roundhouse. That being the case, if there's any issues going forward, I hope council will certainly put in a hold harmless and a defense clause in the arrangement with the road commission. I will keep track of what's going on because I don't care if you go forward or not. But I think the citizens of this community ought to know what you're investing in this. And I'm using your own documents. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any more comments from the public?
Steve Rosnowski, 9316 Jackman Road. I'm here related to proposed zoning ordinance changes that were entertained at the last meeting related to chickens and residential properties. I did send an email out to the board members. I received a response from Mr. Clements, which I appreciate. If you have not read my email, I ask that you please do. It's going to give more detail on what I'm asking than I'm going to be able to offer here in 5 minutes. My concern is that the proposed ordinance changes are overly broad to completely ban chickens in residential properties. I understand that it's complaint-based. My concern is that if you're making amendments to the current zoning ordinance, that it's not guaranteed in perpetuity that it will continue to be enforced on a complaint basis. And so if you're going to make changes, I would ask that as a board, you look at different options and try to find a more nuanced approach that allows people to have maximum use of their property so long as it's not impacting their neighbors. What I would propose is focus on the three main problems that I heard. I spoke with the ordinance officer and I spoke with Mr. Peroni on the phone at length, which are really odor. You know, if you can smell the chickens at your neighbor's property, I understand it needs to be addressed. Noise, similar to a barking dog. If you've got roosters and it's bothering your neighbors, by all means, address it through your noise ordinance. If trespass is an issue, if they're going onto your neighbor's property, absolutely, that's a problem and should be addressed. So I'm not saying don't address it. I'm not saying make it the wild, wild west, but I am saying there are situations where it does make sense. You shouldn't be addressing small residential lots in the same manner as large rural residential lots, because there are areas in Bedford Township where it is not a problem. And by taking a little more nuanced approach, I think you could find a solution there. The other thing that I've heard is that this is a clarification and not really a change, because currently it's interpreted that chickens are not currently allowed on residential properties. But to my understanding, if a clarification is necessary, that means that there are people interpreting it differently than the township is interpreting it. So there is an opportunity to open the book here on this ordinance, and that's what's being done. And legal counsel was directed to draft ordinance changes, which would then go to planning and then possibly to the county and back to the township for approval. And what I'm asking is that rather than just say, it's always been done this way, we're just going to clarify and use the language that's already there and say, we're doing it this way because that's the way it's always been done, to look at it, get some more nuance, understand where it makes sense and where it may be permissible, and then adjust your ordinance accordingly while you have the opportunity now, as opposed to moving forward with something just because that's the way it has been done in the past and painting with a really broad brush. If I could, Mr. Clements' response said it really well. He said, some say there are no chickens, period, unless zoned ag. Some want complete lack of any restrictions where any and all animals on private property should be allowed. As with most extreme positions, the balance is in finding the answer in the middle that is reflective of what our neighbors want as a whole. And I think that says it really well. I mean, there's some nuance here to be had. Other communities have done it. You aren't the first to run into this. I know Ann Arbor has a chicken ordinance. I mean, there are other communities that are doing it. It's becoming more prevalent. And I would just ask that, since the book's open, that you consider other options and consider situations where it does make sense. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any more comments from the public?
Good evening, Mark Ellsworth, 1421 Winding Way. I came with three things, now I came with two things, now I have three. One, I'm sure I'm on the list for a banner sign. I have a banner sign, and Damon Cecil and I have talked many times, and it was basically the placement of my banner sign. It was out too close to the road, so we moved it back, and he was happy. I had no idea until tonight that banner signs were illegal. I didn't know that. I mean, and I've gone through sign ordinance and everything else. I think when that sign ordinance was written, was there such a thing as a banner sign?
If so.
No, I don't think there was. So that's one of the things that I think if you work with people and say, listen, just move it back so it's not in the road right away, people can see to get in and out, everything's fine. Pretty soon there's going to be a huge pumpkin sign telling people to go to Erie for the pumpkin patch on my corner. That makes it hard for people to see around, but we always seem to allow that, and that's okay. To finish up, Trudy had asked one time why we hadn't got a banner or marker, large, what do you call it, sign, a road sign in front. That's because the committee let Jason put a liquor cabinet sign on top. So he got his sign, and he didn't do anything to help me, obviously, who's stuck in a corner, which is why I have the banner stand, so people know that I'm back there. Second, in a very positive note, I'm understanding that the event that happened in downtown Temperance went very well, but I'd like to give you an alternative to closing the road. And I waited, I knew this for a long time. TC and I have talked about it, and I wanted to wait until after it was all done so that you guys, it was closer to the event. September 27th, 28th, and 29th, Clinton has a fall festival that's been going on 30 years, kind of like what you guys want to do. It's raised over $90,000 in scholarships, and they do not shut down M12. They keep the road open except for a parade, and they have the same setup where they have a park down at the end of the road. The community all comes out. They're all watching people in the road. They have booths up and down the road that people walk up and down between the storefronts, and it's a pretty cool thing. I mean, they've worked 30 years to get it dialed into what they have. So I just ran this as a copy so I could give it to somebody. So if you guys wanted to go check out or take an alternative and see how somebody else is doing something, because I heard it said that nobody else has done anything like this or shut the roads down. They do it, and they do it very well. And you might be able to pick up a few vendors here or there, pass some cards out, say, hey, we're trying to get our thing going down here in Temperance or whatever. So I thought that was pretty cool and something you guys should check out. Somebody from that committee should check out. Third, Paul always thinks I'm attacking him. I'm trying not to attack you, but at the last meeting in your final comment, the way you treated Nancy, I thought was a little over the top. And it looks like it's been addressed. I mean, you guys used to be on the same team attacking the last supervisor, and I know you don't like that now. I know Nancy doesn't like that attack, but I mean, you always kept him in check. So thanks. I would deal with that offline, not in front of everybody in the community. Thanks.
I agree with you. I did not treat her properly last meeting, so I apologize for that.
Gail Kane, 1056 West Temperance. Mr. Ellsworth, it's known as Downtown Temperance Day. Give me a second. I need a hairdresser, but I want to make sure that my best billboard pose is here in case my haters will post my picture on a bash on a Facebook page. But congratulations, Nancy. I'm being named most negative. That title had been mine, but I'll share it. Kudos for having the guts to stand up for your rights and beliefs, which brings me to why I stand here. I almost came in my pajamas last time, totally appalled by the behavior of the supervisor towards one who was a member of the dream team. Excuse me, give me 5 seconds back. Yes, Mr. Peroni, your behavior is old. 4 long years we sat and watched you attack and obstruct everything Mr. Stewart tried to enact. You sat on planning for 4 years. If capital planning's so important, why didn't you tend to that instead of using that position to line your pockets for your campaign purposes? And as a supervisor, your behavior has become worse. Anyone who opposes you is negative. You told someone you're the supervisor and you don't need anyone's permission. You can do what you want. You're a bully, a dictator, not a leader. Some are blinded to your negative self. If they know of all your backdoor deals and cover-ups, the very people you are to serve disgust you. I witnessed a lady waiting to see you, and instead you dumped her on Mr. Pryor. She could have easily spoken with him during the time she waited for you. To Mr. Rick, who's not here tonight, they haven't ever stopped laughing. I have had other agencies compare working with some Bedford officials to the liking of dealing with a 3-year-old who's having a temper tantrum. It's not funny. It's sad and it's disgusting. Heaven help us come November 2020. I know that something needs to change, and I'm willing to risk the abuse on Facebook and any place else to stand up here and say my opinions. But you know, we could fix all this. All we got to do is plan for another festival. Party planning, that's the whole thing. And let's do it at the site of the roundabout. After all, that's a really cool place to have it. Mr. TC, the overlay rules are different and need to stay that way for a good reason. And this is in regards to the ordinance issues. And I have a lot that I could say regarding that, especially when you have an ordinance officer tell you that you need to give way to someone because of where they came from and because of who you are in the community. There's a lot of problems. So, and I see my green lights flashing, so I'm going to wave to my Facebook fans, and I will see you later.
Thank you for your comments. Any more comments from the public?
Good evening, Logan Tisdale, 1308 Brandywine Street. I can't imagine a police department that doesn't have a proactive presence in the community. Our ordinance to people are just like a police department, except they're doing ordinance work, and I think there needs to be a healthy balance between complaint and also proactive work. If somebody's going to a complaint and they see something that's in violation of our ordinances, especially if it has to do with public safety, they ought to be able to take action with no problem. I don't think they ought to be so rigidly confined to just one method of operation that it doesn't give them some flexibility. And I think when it's necessary to be proactive in certain circumstances, they ought to be given that option. Signage, it says the statutory width of Michigan's road right-of-way is 66 feet, or 2 rods, 33 feet on each side of each section line. There shouldn't be any signage whatsoever on the highway right-of-ways. And if it blocks any kind of vision for people pulling out on different roads, that sign ought to be taken down. I've seen signs where people have put garage sale signs on stop signs and things like that, and it's ridiculous. Some of the signages that are out there, people put big signs out there, when you pull out, you can't even see where you're going. If it obstructs vision, it's in violation of the statutory width of the road, it ought to be taken down. And that's what should be enforced vehemently. And I think our ordinance department does a pretty decent job. I think it ought to be done across the board, like somebody said in there. If one person has it, it should be across the board. And I think a lot of people are afraid to complain sometimes. They see something and it bothers them, but they don't want to be a bad neighbor and they don't complain. I know I've been guilty of that myself, and maybe it's come back to haunt me. I'm not really sure. But I think sometimes if a legitimate person comes into this township and goes to the ordinance department and says, I want to make a complaint but remain anonymous, and that person's a legitimate person, you ought to be able to tell by looking at a person if it's somebody that's legitimate, then the bottom line is you ought to be able to take an anonymous complaint and check up on that. That's my personal feelings about it. if there wasn't an opportunity for people to make anonymous complaints or anonymous tips, police departments would fold up in many cases because they'd be afraid of repercussions by the person they're complaining about. And that's possible. I mean, we live in a society now, you really don't know what's going on a lot of times with neighbors. And I think there ought to be some way, some method of somebody making a legitimate anonymous complaint that can be checked on. And if the person asks who made the complaint, the ordinance department ought to be able to say, we are not at liberty to tell you, or we're not going to tell you that and not divulge that. If they want to get it through freedom of information, then maybe they can do that. But there should be a way that they can make an anonymous complaint, I think. That's my personal opinion on it, because I think anonymous complaints can be very valid and useful to the community. I don't want Bedford Township to look like a third world country. So I think enforcing ordinances is an important issue. And what may not bother me may bother somebody else. And because anybody can get away with something because they think on their property they can get away with anything. And I've seen that. Sometimes people think they can do anything on their property. And what that does is it does bring down values of whole communities, whole neighborhoods, because then somebody can do whatever they want to do on their property. And if we're going to make ordinances, then they need to be enforced. Pretty simple. We make state laws so that they're enforced. We just don't put them on the books just to make them look good. They ought to be enforced. They ought to be enforced fairly and legitimately, and that's all I think people can ask for. And I think that's not something that we should look at lightly. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any more comments from the public? Okay, seeing none, to board members' comments. Ms. Tenenberry?
First of all, I'd like to thank the board for moving forward on the capital improvement plan. At least we have a way to go, some kind of formal idea of how we're going to move forward. That's more than we've had for a long time. So I appreciate that, and I would like to have it go on record that I would like to be a member of that. If you're appointing, I thought maybe people could volunteer, but I'm volunteering if you see fit. Anyway. And then I'd like to remedy a huge disservice that I did many months ago to a member of this community and a business owner. I said at one meeting quite a while ago, and I should have remedied it sooner, but I apologize for not doing that. I said that there were no newspapers in Bedford Township, and that is totally an incorrect statement. There is a wonderful newspaper called the Bedford Press. I'm sure many of you have gotten it. I don't normally plug a business, but this is the only one, so we can plug it. I can plug it. It's been in business for 34 years. It's an excellent hometown, very newsy paper. The owner is Karen Daggett. She's been in business here, as it said, 34 years. She's been a resident her lifetime, and so she gives opportunity for other businesses to advertise, and her columns and her reporting is right on, and she keeps up with almost all the things that are going on in Bedford. So I appreciate the Bedford Press, and I thank Karen for staying in business. It's not always been easy, but I appreciate her giving us, Bedford Township, a Bedford newspaper. And thank you, Karen, and I apologize for not remedying that sooner.
Mr. Clemens?
I have two things. First, an appeal. This morning, thousands of kids in Bedford went back to school. A lot of them are very small children. Mine are 6 and 8. And one thing we know about small children is that they're easily distracted, they're easily excited, and they're often confused. And so I'm just asking everybody to please be very mindful of your cars, your speed, your presence on the roadway. School buses have stop signs, and they're not a suggestion. They're actually encouraging you to stop. I get that it can be frustrating in a commute. all the time when I'm commuting to Monroe. I get stuck behind a bus on Route Road and yell at myself. But at the same time, the risk to pass that vehicle and put a child's life in danger certainly does not negate the potential minute or two I might save driving to Monroe. The other thing I wanted to bring up is more for the board, and I'm not looking for debate or discussion. I'm actually looking for you just to ponder this over the next few weeks. I spent a lot of time this last week reviewing our board meetings online. One of the things I know for absolute certain is all 7 of us want good things for this community. I don't doubt that at all. I've worked with each of you individually and collectively, and while we disagree, we all want our community to thrive. And what's interesting is when you go back and you look at our forever footprint, which is captured in video and put on the internet, that's not really the takeaway. The takeaway is that we tend to get caught up on details that are largely either irrelevant or are not related to the subject matter at hand. And that concerns me for a couple reasons. It concerns me because A, it's not a reflection of who we are. And largely, I think what this board has done the last 3 years has been really good. I think we've done a lot of healthy things to move Bedford in the right direction. And so I think we all want a permanent reflection of who we are going forward to be positive. More than that, I'm concerned because if you think about any economic development, if I were a business owner looking to move to Bedford, or I was the next superintendent, or was going to be a principal, or any other person moving here, the first thing I would do would be to analyze these meetings. I'd want to know largely who am I entrusting either my company or, my own home value to. And I don't think the impression that we leave is really who we are. So I just want us to always be mindful of that. And this is where I'm going with this. The interesting part about studying those videos is that we always get in the weeds when we don't follow Robert's rules. The debates, everything that is not ideal always occurs before the motion, before the second, and before discussion. And I would be the first to tell you, I don't want this board to squash discussion. I love the idea that we discuss, that we disagree, that we have different ideas, and that should be public. We were elected to represent our neighbors and to bring those ideas public and to have, conversation, even disagreement. But when we do all of that pre-motion, we negate a lot of the reason why those rules exist. And it's interesting to me that we constantly tend to get into the weeds when we don't even follow the rules that are put in front of us. So my ask is if each person here would consider it, Mr. Chair, it's your meeting. You largely get the say there. But when we have a motion, we have a second, and then we have discussion, I think this group is at its best. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Mr. Montry?
Just a couple of things. First, I want to thank all of the people who came out and gave public comment again tonight. I think we had a good amount of people giving constructive. We have a involved citizenry, and I feel like that's growing, and I feel like that's a very healthy thing for any American community. My other thing was I went out to the Temperance Street Fest, and partially I told my wife when we were on our way, half the reason I got to go here is I got to see if I made a good decision shutting the streets down. And it was awesome, and I don't know how they would have done it without having the streets down, which is why I made my vote in that direction. I'm interested in looking up in, I think, Clinton Township is what he had said. We're up at the end of this month. I'm very interested in looking into that, of what our options would be outside of that. Specifically appreciate Mr. Rosnowski's email and coming here today. I think he made very valid points, and I think they need to be looked at further by this board.
Mr. Francis?
Kind of playing an old saw again. Real estate taxes, just as a reminder, they're due by this month, September the 16th, which is a Monday. They're normally due on the 14th because that falls on a weekend. You go with the next business day. They need to be paid in full by then, or there's penalty and interest charge. The state requires us to charge 1% interest per month on any unpaid balance. So I just want to caution you, be aware of that date and handle it in your normal
Or else we can't pay the, we can't pay the bills.
and we ought to pay our electric bill. The only change that I'm aware of as far as paying bills here is the payments for water and sewer bills are no longer accepted by the bank, Monroe Bank and Trust, and that's due to the merger that they are in the midst of with First Merchant. Their policy is to not accept those payments as a service. At this point in time, it might change in the future, but right now, they've asked us not to make those payments there. So the payments are accepted here. The checks for the sewer need to be made out to Bedford Township and either delivered or mailed here. The payments for the water bills are payable to South County Water. You can mail them to their office on Lewis Avenue, or we accept the payments here as we have in the past. It's a minor change, but it is an important one, and I just wanted to remind everybody to be aware that their taxes are due, and I'm sure they are.
Ms. Hirschberger?
Two things. I was notified today by the organizers of the Downtown Temperance Days that due to the Street Fest, August 24th, Temperance Days will not be held September 7th. They just felt that there was no need to hold a duplicate event. Also, the newsletter comes out next week, and you will find it in our Bedford newspaper, the Bedford Press.
On proactive or complaint-based, I talked to 6 people, and every one of them thought we should be proactive. In talking to my wife about it, she agrees. She's like, it's kind of like having rules at your home with your kids, but you only get in trouble if they tattle on you. We have ordinances in place. Either we enforce them or we don't. What's the point of having all these ordinances is if you have to have a neighbor tell on you? I mean, I hear it constantly of the issues we put in neighbors' paths because they have to tell on their neighbor. And then when they FOIA it and find out, they're livid. And it's just, I feel like we have ordinance for a reason. We have ordinance officers. We pay for them to be out on the road. The letter's nice. You hand it to them, and it starts the process. You know, you drive around some of these neighborhoods. Take some time and drive through the neighborhoods. You got boats in front yards that have been there for years that have weeds growing over them. Well, that brings property values down. You have major issues with sidewalks. I mean, you have every winter. I used to have neighbors that didn't shovel their snow on the sidewalks. You have handicapped people in neighborhoods. You have people parking all over sidewalks, putting basketball hoops on sidewalks. You'd have people complaining every day here. My point is, you got ordinance officers, you have ordinances in place, enforce them. You know, I don't think we should be going and looking in people's backyards at all, or looking at, see if they have chickens, but the things that are apparent from driving by, sidewalks, blockage, heaved up sidewalks, you know, trailers that have plugs in them going to their house where somebody's living in the front yard. Those are things that are easy ones that, you know, signs, you know, either we enforce or we don't. You know, I don't think it's fair for the business owner that was just here. He's going to have to remove his flag sign. We have a complaint on him. So how is it fair for him? Now, we expect him to complain on 47 other businesses that are doing the same daggum thing. So I don't know. I think we really need to think about it before we just say, ooh, let's just stick with burning. You know, there's a lot of other ordinances. The Temperance Street Fest, it was a hit. We had more people in downtown Temperance than, from what I've heard from longtime members of this community, than we've ever had. You look down that street where it was closed, and you couldn't drive a golf cart or ride a bike. It was packed. There was tons of people. Great time. I mean, people that did come, they spent the whole day there. You know, and it's only going to get better. It brought tons of people in that area. It was one of the best days the Lions Den's ever had in sales. Yeah, Sunoco was hurt that day. Food Town was hurt that day. And that's something we're going to address in the future. You know, if, you know, of what we're gonna do with that. But I tell you, the businesses that were down there and that actually capitalized on it did very well, and it was a huge success. The Temperance Tap Grant is, they're still working on the sidewalks, and now they're gonna be working on the corners. Roads are coming along. I wanna thank the residents and the road commission and Paul Francis and Mannik Smith for all your hard work on this committee. We'll be getting together next week, and our road commission meeting will be next month, where we kind of lay out our plan. But we need to get together and talk about funding too. We have a fire department that needs funded. We have a capital improvement plan we need to budget for. So a lot of needs to go into that before we have these meetings and find out, you know, where are we at? Do we have the million or do we have 500,000? You know, because that's a big difference for what we need to do. We have to do Adler Road. I met with Walter Rule last week about Adler Road, and he's ready to partner. He wants to do it in 2020. So we have Crab Road that needs to be finished up. That needs another surface on it. So we have a few big projects that we still need to hit. I understand the fire department's in a 2021 budget year, right, that we'll be budgeting for, so we'll have one more big year, but just, I too, with Mr. Clements, you know, with the kids back to school, you see a lot of people passing buses. It's on Facebook every day. Man, gosh, don't pass buses, please. You know, and I do think, you know, we definitely need to take a look at what Rudolph Libby's doing with the whole program that they've talked to us about. Look at all of our options. I think what we're doing is really good. Tonight is huge. We're putting a plan together. We're moving forward. And I think in the end, we're all going to be very happy, you know, with what we're doing with that. We have 175,000 budgeted on our end for the roundabout. The road commission has 175,000. The grant's for 600,000. The property's 60,000. Phase 1, 2,500. Phase 2, 10,000. That's 12,500 plus 60,000. It's pretty simple math. It's $72,000. I don't know where this $90,000 is coming from. First of all, we haven't even bought the building yet. So right now we're only into it 12.5. So we have $175,000 budgeted for our end of the project. That's buying the building, that's tearing the buildings down, and that's relocation of a water line if we need to do it. And we're well within our budget for that. I too want to thank all the comments tonight, even though I didn't agree with a couple of them. I want to thank you for your comments with the chickens. I think it's good information. You know, somebody with 40 acres of residential property, why wouldn't they be allowed to do what they want on it? It's a discussion we need to have. But, you know, in talking with Damon, the rule of the agricultural has been in place for a long, long time, and it's like that for a reason. If you want farm animals, you buy residential property, you know, and that's kind of what the mindset has been for all these years. But I'm not saying that we can't talk about it and possibly look into it. So, other than that, I have no further comment. Anybody else have any comments? Ms. Tenberry?
I don't want to leave this, I don't want to leave the meeting with some figures that I don't think are. February 12th, 2019 says, we have now been advised the Road Commission Board has approved a cost of $175,000 as they share in the project. That's construction.
Mm-hmm.
That's the construction of the road, not the buying of land. And
I said our portion of it is buying the land, removing the water line, and tearing the buildings down. That's our portion, and we budgeted $175 for that.
well, the document says construction, so I don't want to argue. I just did not want to. I wanted to clarify. If the document's wrong, the document's wrong. Thank you.
We have a long ways to go with a roundabout. We've spent the study money so far. There's been no other monies as far as that I know of. Barry, is there any other monies that have been spent on the roundabout other than studies? Phase 1, Phase 2. And then we got to buy the property. Yeah, so I mean, there's not, I don't know where 90's coming from, but, so we stand adjourned.
You're not planning it.